Hello and welcome everyone to another biology class of Fun Scholar. So today we'll continue the discussion regarding improvement in food resources. The first lecture of which we have already discussed in the previous class, and there we had discussed about the introductory part, that what is food, why do we need improvement in food resources, how can we bring about this improvement in food resources. So all these things we have discussed. Now in today's lecture we will see first of all how we can increase the yield of the crops, which is known as crop production management. Then we will know about nutrient management, that what are the nutrients that we can supply to the crops, both artificial as well as natural, so that the crops flourish to the fullest. And then we will also try and discuss the part about crop protection management, that how we can protect the crops after harvest so that post harvest loss can be minimized. So without any further delay, let's start today's discussion. So production management. So earlier in the previous class we have already discussed or seen that the food resource management is divided into three steps. One is the crop production, the management, how we can increase the variety, how we can manage the nutrients, and how we can protect the crops. So the first step is crop production management. Here we will know how can we manage or the production of crops. That means how, even if the land is fixed or the area is fixed, we can increase the yield from that fixed land area. So before this, we'll watch this video and then we'll discuss further.
Is production of crops a very easy practice? Can I just buy a piece of land and begin farming? Can a small land give me the yield of a big one? Let me give you an example. We have two men who are farmers. The first one, named Samir, has 2 hectares of land, while the other, whose name is Ronan, has 4 hectares of land. The former one invests in a tractor, fertilizers, and many other types of equipment. The latter has land but cannot afford to buy any of these equipments. What would be the resulting yield? Samir had a higher quantity of crop produced even in a small piece of land. Ronan did not have the finances to help him make a profitable harvest. This example tells us that the inputs in farming are directly related to the yield of the land. Thus, higher the cost of production, better the yield. When a farmer has an ability to purchase high-end technological equipment, his cropping system varies and he can earn more from his land. Based on this monetary aspect of farming, there are 3 different types of production in farming. A production based on no cost at all. This is when a farmer does not invest in any equipment or farming paraphernalia to better his production. Second would be the low cost production, and third is the high cost production. So, what are the things that characterize this kind of production? On which level does the farmer need to invest in to enhance his yield? 3 main components need to be taken into consideration while talking about crop production management. Firstly, let us look at nutrient management. Secondly, we must look at irrigation of the farms. Yes, water is a very important requirement for a farmer. And thirdly, we must look at the cropping patterns. Let us look at the first on in this video. What do we mean by nutrient management? How can we manage the nutrient intake of plants? We all require food for our growth and survival. We also choose food items we need the most and eat those nutrients which our body lacks. Similarly, plants too need a variety of nutrients. They generally need about 16 nutrients in all. From where do you think they get these nutrients? Plants are in contact with the air, water, and soil. It must be these very places which provide them with nutrients. If that is so, what nutrients do you think air will provide plants with? We have studied in lower grades that plants require both oxygen and carbon dioxide. These nutrients are provided to the plants by air. What about water? Take a guess. Let me give you a hint. These are the components that make the water molecule. Hydrogen, oxygen. Yes, H2O tells us that water provides plants with hydrogen and oxygen. Let us look at soil. Soil provides plants with many nutrients. Some of them are required in large quantities by plants, while some are required in smaller quantities. The ones which are required in larger quantities are called as macronutrients, while the smaller quantity ones are called as micronutrients. Nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, calcium, magnesium, and sulfur are the macronutrients, while iron, manganese, boron, zinc, copper, molybdenum, and chlorine are micronutrients. So, how can we enhance crop production? We must first see to it that the plants get all these nutrients. If nutrients are deficient, then the plant is susceptible to many diseases and it can affect growth as well as their reproduction. Nutrient management is an important aspect of crop production management. But how can we add nutrients to the soil? We will look at that in our next video.
So from this video, we have got to know that how different types of nutrients are sourced from nature by the crop plants. And by utilizing those nutrients only, the crops flourish. Now, if air, water or soil is deficient in such nutrients, so it is on us or the farmers who are growing the crops to supply the deficient nutrients so that the crops they can grow healthy. Deficiency of nutrients affects physiological processes just like the life processes that we have, like growth, development, reproduction, excretion. So for plants also the similar type of processes are there which can be hampered due to deficiency of nutrients, not only to increase the yield but also to supply the plants with such type of nutrients so that the quality of the yield is also improved. We need to manage the nutrients either in the form of manure, which we know is the organic form to supply nutrients, or through fertilizers, which is the artificial manner, because these are synthetic substances prepared in the laboratories. Now, how can we supply, or what are the types of nutrients? For that, we need to watch this video.
There are two ways of increasing the nutrient value of the soil. Firstly, by adding manure, and secondly, by adding fertilizers. Let us say the former is a natural product, while the latter is an artificially produced man-made supplement. How is manure produced? What is it made up of? Manure is organic in nature. What do we mean by organic? What is it made up of? Organic would mean that it is made up of plant and animal waste. Yes, The leftover vegetable remains and excreta of plants and animals are put together to be decomposed. This decomposed material then enriches the soil. It improves the nutrient structure, helps the soil to retain more water, and also helps in drainage of water. Do you know that there are two main types of manure based on their components? Yes. One is called the compost and the vermicompost, while the second one is known as the green manure. What is the difference between the two? Compost material is formed by digging a pit in which all biological waste materials are added. In this pit, the farm wastes, animal excreta, dung, and many other decomposable waste materials are thrown. In some days, the material is decomposed by various organisms and rich organic manure is formed. Now, if earthworms are used to hasten this process of decomposition, we call the resultant manure as vermicompost. Vermicompost pits are commercially viable and they produce high quality manure. What about green manure? As the name suggests, the manure is green. This is a novel way of improving the quality of the soil. Some plants are grown in a farm before the sowing of the crops in that area. These plants, like the hemp or guar, are mulched into the soil, which then act as natural manure to the plants. Their dead remains decompose and provide nutrition to the growing crops. These are the different natural ways in which nutrients can be added to the soil. What about the man-made way of enhancing soil nutrients? Can chemicals be added to the soil? Yes, chemicals in the form of fertilizers can be added into the soil to enhance the nutrient value. These chemicals, however, come under the high cost production in farming. Apart from being expensive, they can also harm the soil. Excess usage causes soil pollution. Prolonged usage leads to the killing of microorganisms in the soil, thus reducing its natural nutrient value. Fertilizers surely help farmers to receive short-term benefits, but one must be careful to replenish the natural nutrient level of the soil naturally, and the biofertilizers are eco-friendly. Biofertilizers are the ones which are produced with the help of living microorganisms. There is absolutely no chemical involvement. Now that we know about the different ways of nutrient management, we will understand the role of irrigation and cropping patterns in our next video.
So from this video, I hope now the idea is clear that we can either add nutrients in the form of organic manure or in the form of synthetic fertilizers. Both have their own set of pros and cons. Manure either compost, vermicompost or the green manure. So they actually supply the wholesome nutrients. That means not a particular type of nutrient. So they cannot meet the deficiency need of the crop. If for example, if the soil is deficient particularly in nitrogen or particularly in potassium, so for that manure is not the right choice because it will supply the nutrient, all the nutrients as a whole. But in case of fertilizer, we can just supply that particular nutrient which is deficient and which is a hindrance in the path of development of that crop. But on the other, and also on the other hand, manure gives slow result. So it takes the time for the nutrient supply by the manure and then it will be absorbed by the plants and then the results will be manifested. But again, in case of fertilizers, since they are available in the absorbable forms only, so once you spray them, so they are readily taken up by the plants and they give you speedy results. But as I said, each set has their own pros and cons. Manure, they are eco-friendly and they don't harm the environment also. They don't make the soil infertile. But on the other hand, excessive use of fertilizers lead to soil pollution, water pollution, and also make the soil infertile if they are used repeatedly. Manures, as said in the video, is composed of organic matter, and the quantity of nutrients, they are present in small quantity, because after decomposition only a small, first the organic matter that will be converted into the absorbable form by the decomposers present in the soil, and then small quantities of nutrients will be supplied to the crop. But it enhances soil fertility, improves the texture, the structure of the soil, and water retention, and it also improves the aeration in the soil, so that the roots of the crop plants can breathe properly. In clay soil, it improves drainage and reduces water logging. So this one only I was telling. Drainage means so that the water can percolate through the layers of the soil properly, and it is not clogged. And if it is clogged in certain layers, so then it will lead to decaying of the roots. And obviously it has got environmental benefits, because it protects the environment by reducing chemical use and recycling of farm waste. So it will reduce the burden on the heavy use of the chemical substances such as fertilizers, and on the other hand, the waste materials can be reused. Now the waste formation or the production of the waste will also be decreased by the formation of manure. Now in manure we have two categories. First of all, compost and vermicompost. So compost is made from decomposed farm waste, livestock excreta, vegetable waste. So all the organic matter, particularly which we throw away as the wet waste. We know nowadays municipalities, they supply two dustbins, and we need to segregate the waste. One is the dry waste, another is the wet waste, so or the biodegradable. So all the biodegradable wet waste can come under this category, from which compost can be actually made. And vermicompost means the same thing, but here we use the earthworms. The earthworms not only speeds up the process of this decomposition, but make the manure all the more nutrient rich, because when they eat up the soil and they excrete that, so that soil is rich in the nutrients which is obtained from their gut. And then green manure, which is grown on the fields before the actual crop is planted or the seeds are sown, and then during plowing they are mulched with the soil, and when they get decomposed, they slowly keep on supplying the nutrients required by the crops. Commercial fertilizers, they provide nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. We know that NPK, in short, we say NPK fertilizers for robust vegetative growth and high cost farming, because obviously since they are produced synthetically in the laboratories, they are very much expensive, and all the farmers cannot afford to have fertilizers, and it gives high vegetative growth in a very short duration of time, but at the same time it makes the plants very much resistant to the use of fertilizers only. Now for once or twice if you use the fertilizers, it will give you very good results, but for the next times it will be make the crops resistant. So this problem is not present in case of manure, but this problem crops up in case of fertilizers. Application procedure is that therefore we have need to apply fertilizer in correct dose at the correct time and with proper irrigation, so that whenever we supply the fertilizers, it should be dissolved in water properly, because plant absorbs the minerals along with water only. That we know, that root hairs which are present on the surface of the roots, they absorb water and minerals. So unless and until this nutrients which is in the form of fertilizers is not properly dissolved in water, it would just remain as residue in the soil, ultimately leading to soil pollution or making the soil infertile, but will not be used for the purpose that it has aimed for. And excessive use obviously will lead to loss of fertility and depletes organic matter and harms soil organisms. So the natural flora of the soil, which is beneficial for the decomposition process, is also harmed. Also the environment is harmed in the manner that the pollinators such as the birds and the insects who come up, so they also actually ingest the fertilizers, and these chemicals harm their physiological processes once it enters their gut and ultimately leads to their death. So in every way fertilizers are actually harmful for the environment. Then organic farming, it means minimum or negligible use of chemicals, and the focus is on organic manure, biofertilizer and biopesticides. Though sometimes the organic waste sometimes they fail, so we need to then shift our focus to the chemical ones. But if even we shift our focus, but the use should be minimized, the heavy dependence should not be there, otherwise the farming process will become very harmful for the environment, and the crops produced by using these chemical fertilizers will also be unfit for human consumption also. Recycling farm waste by using the straw, livestock excreta, blue-green algae to enrich the soil. This can be done by forming of obviously compost and vermicompost. Now, cropping system. Cropping system, what is that? There are different ways that we can carry out the cultivation of the crops. Mixed cropping, intercropping and crop rotation. All of them help to control the pest, weeds and improve soil nutrient profile, because each type of crop requires different types of nutrients, and it actually some crops like the leguminous ones, they actually are helpful in enriching the nitrogen content of the soil, because they have got the rhizobium in their root nodules which help in fixing the atmospheric nitrogen. So therefore we can take help of these procedures, which ultimately will help us to establish organic farming as the way of farming which is suitable not only for the environment but also for human consumption. And its long term benefit is that manure, this organic farming which is dependent on manure, it will actually maintain soil health and fertility for a longer duration of time throughout many years, because we are not harming the natural microflora of the soil, we are not harming the pollinators, we are not harming the natural fertility of the soil. So obviously the result that we can actually yield from that particular land, so that profit we can earn for many years. Now, next topic that we are going to deal with is about irrigation. What is irrigation? Irrigation is supply of water to the crops, in simple words. Now, we know without water, no living organism can survive. So, be it plants, be it animals, or any other group of organisms, be it human beings, no organisms can survive. So, the supply of water in the crop field is basically known as irrigation. Now, there are the two methods of irrigation. One is the traditional method, another is the modern method. The traditional method is obviously very tedious, but it is cost effective. On the other hand, the modern method is costly, but on the other hand, it has got many benefits such as saving the water resource and also saving time and very much effective. So all these things we'll explore through this video. So let's watch this video first.
What aspect of crop production management did we study in our last video? We saw how we can manage the nutrients in the soil. In this lesson, let us look at another important requirement of plants. Water. Without water, plants cannot survive as it is the basic requirement for all types of agricultural activities. Where do you think we get this water from? What, according to you, is the main source of water? Rain. Absolutely right. And do we have rainfall throughout the year? Unfortunately, we don't. How do we then get the water we need for the plants? You may say we can store water to fulfill our needs. But the question is, can we store water all year around? Thanks to nature, it has its own way of storing water. Can you name the most common place where water is stored in a village? Wells? That's right. And do you know that there are two types of wells? One is called the tube well, while the other is called a dug well. What do you think is the difference between the two? The major difference between the two is the method in which they are created by humans. Dug wells are commonly found in villages and they do not need heavy machineries to be created. A simple shovel can help create a dug well. A dug well, in simple words, is an open hole made for the sole purpose of obtaining water for a simple household. The water is taken out manually with the help of ropes and a bucket. What about a tube well? The word itself hints at the structure of the well. A tube well consists of a pipe or a tube that is placed inside the ground. The ground is dug with the help of a machine. This machine keeps drilling until it hits the underground water table. This water table will then ensure constant supply of water. Can water be drawn out manually here? Of course not. Knowing the fact that the hole is quite deep, water can only be taken out with the help of a water pump. These tube wells are majorly used for irrigation purposes and they have the underground water at their disposal. What are the other water sources which can help irrigation? Have you heard about canals? What are canals? Canals are man-made cemented pipe-like structures that form a network in a particular area. These canals receive the water from a nearby water reservoir or directly from a river. This water is then carried through these canals to the nearby fields. The main canal is distributed into several smaller canals. What does this remind you of? A river and its distributaries, right? Well, let us say the canal system is an artificial man-made river system. The river system also brings to mind the idea of a river lift system. Do you know what a river lift system is? The places where canals cannot be built is where we opt for a river lift system. Building of a canal system involves labor and finances, and hence some villages cannot afford the building of canals. What do they do then? They have the rivers, don't they? So, the water is directly taken from the rivers. This requires the use of pumps. Water is taken from the main river to a centralized delivery chamber. Water is then made to flow with the help of gravity to the other parts of the field. Can you think of any other such reservoirs of water? What about tanks? Tanks act as a small storage reservoir. They intercept the surface runoff and collect the water. This water can then be used to irrigate the fields. This method is now widely used and we know it as rainwater harvesting. Rainwater can be allowed to seep into the soil where it will be stored in the underground water table. All societies and settlement can employ such techniques of water harvesting. These initiatives will ensure a constant supply of water throughout the year. Another technique is watershed management. Have you heard about the term watershed management? What is watershed? An area of land that drains into a common water body is known as a watershed. The rivers, the underground water, and the surface runoff all drain into a common area. This technique ensures storage of water as well as prevents surface runoffs. How can we help create a watershed? For a start, we could build small check dams. This will enable the water that flows on the surface to seep into the ground. Which other purpose will the dams serve? Do they prevent soil erosion? Yes, check dams not only help increase the underground water level, but they also help check soil erosion. Now that you know the various ways in which water can be made available for crops, let us look at cropping patterns in our next video. Do you know a definitive crop pattern can help save a lot of resources?
So from this video, you have got a clear idea that what are the ways in which we can manage the requirement of irrigation in the crop field. So we can traditionally, as I was saying, that traditionally we could use the dug wells or the submersible pumps. Now what happens in both these cases, that dug wells and submersible pumps, that there should be availability of ample groundwater. The groundwater table, that means the level of groundwater, should be near to the surface so that you can utilize it for the desired purpose. But what happens to other areas where the groundwater table is way below the surface? So for those areas, we can opt for the other options shown in the video. We can go for the canal system wherever we have the availability of the rivers, and if we have the problem of finances or the problem of labor, so then we can opt for river lift system, or in small ways we could use the rainwater harvesting system in each of the homes, so that if every home utilizes this rainwater harvesting, then together the entire crop field can easily be irrigated. And also the option of watershed management has also been given, though it is not a community's initiative. For that we also require the permission of the government, the contractors, so many things are involved. So but these small check dams, these are the ways which will help us to encounter the problems of the requirement of water in the crop field. Now, most agriculture in India relies on timely monsoon and sufficient rainfall. This was the case some few years back, because nowadays neither timely monsoon nor sufficient amount is seen, because either the monsoon, if heavy monsoon is faced, then the time is not the correct time when the crops are growing and developing, maybe after the harvest, which is rather becoming harmful for the growth of the crops. It is leading to the failure of the crops, or the case is becoming so that the rainfall is more than required, the floods are happening. This year we are facing floods in many regions of the country, the north region, south region, the northeastern region. So therefore in many areas we have seen how flood has destroyed so many so the crop fields, which has actually devastated the poor families of the farmers. So the untimely rain and this rain which is actually not sufficient when required but over than needed when it is harmful is creating a mess. So for that only we need to rely on artificial systems. So role of irrigation is to ensure crops receive water at critical stages. As I said, there are many stages. For example, the sowing, after sowing, then there should be the supply of water so that the nutrients are well mixed and soaked, and then those nutrients are passed on along with water to the seed so that the seeds can germinate, the seed coat can be softened and the seed can germinate, and then the embryo can develop into the seedling and come out of the seed. Then throughout the growth period also we need optimum supply of water according to the requirement of the crop, because subsequently now we will go through the types of crops also, where some crops require less water during the growth period while some other require high amount of water. So according to their need, optimum amount of water should be supplied, and this is only the goal of irrigation. Irrigation can significantly also increase expected yields, because as told in the previous video that if there is supply of water, water supports many physiological functions in the plant body just like it does in the animal body, such as growth, reproduction, and then the excretion process, and also it and then conduction of food, of water and food and minerals. So therefore in the presence of water all the physiological functions will happen smoothly and it will lead to healthy growth of the crops. Diverse water sources. Now here all the systems that you have already watched in the video have been discussed in brief. First one is the dug well and the tube well. As I said, here in both these cases, so water is collected from the water bearing strata, which is nothing but the groundwater level below the surface, and tube wells tap deeper water sources than the dug wells, where water is lifted by pumps and used. In case of canals, extensive system or branches are made which will supply water from the river, nearby water reservoir or the river to the entire crop field. And in the river lift system, water is lifted from any river far away from the crop field and then it is stored in a reservoir and then supplied to the desirable crop field. Finally, we have got tanks which will intercept the surface water runoff and it will lead to checking the soil erosion also, and on the other hand it will help in utilizing this water to provide the requirement, to meet the requirement of the crops. Rainwater harvesting also can be done, and then we have got watershed management in order to improve the quality of agriculture. Then we have got this cropping pattern. Here only we will discuss about the types of cropping, that is mixed cropping, intercropping, crop rotation, and how all these things help us to meet the nutrient management and also the needs of the population during different times of the year. So therefore, let's watch this video.
It would amaze you to know that crops are sown in a definitive pattern. Yes, you heard me right. They are just sown in vast fields with absolutely no planning. Farmers have now realized the value of planning the cultivation of crops. What does planning mean when it comes to crop cultivation? What plans can the farmer make for his land? He addresses questions like which crop is best suited for his soil type, or a crop which will give him the best yield in a short span of time. He may also look at the quality of the seeds and their resistance to diseases and pests. Apart from these questions, what else does a farmer plan? Well, he tries to get the maximum yield from his small piece of land. How can he get the best yield? Can he grow multiple crops in a year? Yes, he can. There are various types of cropping patterns that a farmer can employ. Let us look at a few of them in detail in this video. The first cropping pattern is called as mixed cropping. What does this cropping pattern entail? For a start, it requires the seeds of two different crop varieties. In this pattern of cropping, we can have a farmer planting two types of crops in the same piece of land. Wait, did I just say two crops in the same piece of land? Yes. You may now wonder whether the two crops will compete for the nutrients in the soil. You may also think of the damage one crop may do to the other. But this is not the case. The two crops are chosen in such a manner that one does not interfere in the growth of the other. For instance, if wheat and gram are grown together in the same field, the nutrients that wheat depends on will be different from those of gram. This ensures that the failure of one crop doesn't take the toll on the farmer. There always is a backup, and if both do well, then the farmer is assured of double benefits. This is precisely what mixed cropping is all about. The next cropping pattern is called intercropping. Can you take a guess as to how this cropping pattern works? What does the prefix inter mean? In simple words, it means in between. But what does it mean when it comes to the pattern of planting crops? When crops are planted in alternate rows in the same field, we call this technique as intercropping. Once again, care is taken to ensure that the requirements of the two crops are different. Now we come to the last type of cropping pattern. This is called as crop rotation. I am sure the term is self-explanatory. Only one type of crop is grown in the field at a time. However, once the crop has been harvested, a different crop is then planted in the same field. This process is repeated several times. We call this a pre-plant succession. When the plants are growing, it is important to have the land irrigated so that moisture is retained in the soil. It is also necessary to add sufficient nutrients to the soil to help plant growth. Do you know why do we have to take all these measures? This will take us to our next topic. It looks at the idea of crop protection. Crops cannot just grow, they need to be protected against various things that might threaten their growth. We will look at that in detail in our coming videos.
So as told before going into the video, that different cropping patterns are there which are practiced by the farmers, which have got different benefits. First, having multiple types of crops at a time. Second, reduce the loss, because if one crop fails, then the other crop is there, which will ensure the investment made by the farmer. Third thing is that the nutrients, if the soil has got different types of nutrients we know to offer, then different types of crops, they are drawing different types of nutrients, so it will reduce the competition between the crop plants for the same type of nutrients, and also for the economy of the nation and for the greater good of the population, we get to use so many varieties of crops at the same time. So these are the benefits for different cropping practices, and we'll discuss each one of them one by one. Now, mixed cropping, the first is growing two or more crops simultaneously on the same land. The examples are mentioned over here. they are very important. We cannot randomly grow any combination of crops in the field. So therefore we can grow either wheat and gram, or wheat and mustard, or groundnut and sunflower, like this manner. Okay, then it will provide, as I said, insurance against the failure of one crop. Second, we have got, so in what happens in mixed cropping, there is no actually fixed row. That means the seeds, they are planted, or they are sown in the rows, but not like that one row will be of the one crop and the second row will be another crop. So it's not like that. So it can be that in the same row also, it can be row wise also. For example, two rows of wheat, and then it will be alternated with one row of gram, and in this manner, or two plants of wheat and then one plant of gram, like this also it can happen. Then coming to intercropping, so inter means alternate. Here inter means alternate. Here specifically alternate types of cropping system, or the rows are alternated, and the combinations, again we should look for such combination that will not interfere with one of the other's requirement for nutrients, rather it will be complementary to each other. That means if one crop is drawing out, for example, excess of nitrogen from the soil, the other crop should be a leguminous crop which will replenish that nitrogen back to the soil. So in this manner, both the soil quality as well as the quality of the crop will be maintained. And also another benefit is that it will help prevent pests and diseases from spreading among the similar crops. What happens when a single crop plant is infested with any disease or any pest? So since the same genetic variety is present in the neighboring plants also, so it spreads quickly. For example, there is blight of potato. Now this blight of potato will spread to the neighboring plants very quickly. But now imagine the next plant is not a potato plant, it is something else. So what will happen? That spreading will be restricted or will be confined, and in this manner managing diseases and pests will become easy for the farmers. So therefore, this is mixed cropping and intercropping. The difference in terms of this following aspects given over here. So in row pattern for mixed cropping, there is no definite row. For intercropping, there is row, specifically alternatively. That is why the name intercropping. Its purpose is to reduce chances of crop failure in case of mixed cropping. But here in case of intercropping, it increases the yield of crops per unit area. How? As I said, the nutrient utilized by one crop is replenished by another crop. Then harvesting, it cannot be harvested separately because there is mixing. Therefore, if you want to harvest the crops of one type from the entire field which is present haphazardly or sporadically, so it becomes very difficult. But in case of intercropping, since you have marked the rows in which you have planted the crop of one type, so you can harvest it separately. Then seed mixing is done before sowing in case of mixed cropping. From the name itself you can understand, here seeds are not mixed, but they are planted in definite rows, right? And for lastly, fertilizer and pesticide application. In case of mixed farming, fertilizers and pesticides cannot be applied specifically. As I said again, so all the crop plants of one type may not get the exposure to the fertilizer and pesticide because you don't know, you haven't marked the exact spots. But in case of intercropping, you know the rows. So if you can actually identify one crop, so that means the entire row of that or this entire row will be of that crop only, and so it becomes easy to spray the fertilizers and pesticide in the entire row. You need not go to each crop plant and then identify and then utilize the fertilizer and the pesticide. Acha, intercropping and crop rotation. Crop rotation means growing different crops in a planned succession on the same land. Planned succession means that what you will grow. Now, in case of intercropping, as I said, that the crop should be complementary to each other. In crop rotation also the same principle works. The crops which are rotated in the second sowing season should be complementary to the previous one. If the same principle, like if the previous crop has utilized or drawn so much of nitrogen, then the next one should be a leguminous plant. Yes, we'll definitely supply nitrogen, but as I said, we should aim for less utilization of the chemical fertilizers because of its so many detrimental impacts on the environment as well as on the living organisms. So therefore, we should aim for replenishment of the nutrients through the organic process in the next cropping season. So in this manner only we plan the sowing or the cultivation of the crop in case of crop rotation. So and also not only the nutrient, we also check other factors such as moisture availability, irrigation facility. So if the first crop has drawn excess moisture or water from the soil, we need to check that the second crop should not draw so much moisture. So this will lead to acute dehydration of the soil. The soil texture will also be the soil texture will also be disturbed, and then we need to supply more water to the field in order to compensate that. So our aim should be that the next crop which is actually shown after the previous water intensive crop, so that one should utilize less water so that water management is easy, or irrigation, the management of irrigation can be done properly. Proper crop rotation can yield 2 or 3 crops per year. Obviously, we will study subsequently again the Rabi crops, Kharif crops and Zaid crops. So if we count them, so in a single year, we are getting at least 3 types of crops from the same field. So this is crop protection management, about which we will do in the next part of the lecture. We'll keep our discussion till this, that is crop production management. Now in this part, in the next lecture, we'll see how we can protect the crops against the biotic agents as well as the abiotic agents, how we can reduce the post harvest loss and all the other related topics. So stay tuned for discussing those topics, and I'll see you soon in the next part of this lecture. Thank you so much for joining with us, and should you have any queries, do connect with Fun Scholar. Take care until we meet next time. Thank you. Bye bye.